Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and get started. So hello and welcome everyone to the Business for the Common Good panel. I just want to start tonight off by saying thank you to all the students for being here and to extend a huge thank you to the 5 panelists that we have here tonight. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us and share with the students a little bit about your expertise, your experience, and your engagement with nonprofits in the community. Throughout our Business 200 classes, we have been engaging in conversations discussing some unique ways that business leaders can get involved with nonprofits, whether that's serving on a board, volunteering your time and expertise, or sharing some of that business knowledge that we're learning in classes. Today, we have a wonderful opportunity to hear from firsthand from these panelists about how they are doing just that in our community. So to get started, I will start off with some introductions. So my name is Della Garing. I'm a junior here at UST. I'm a Business 200 facilitator, and I will be co-moderating this panel alongside Meg.
Hello, everyone. My name's Meg. I'm also a senior here at St. Thomas. I'm also a Business 200 facilitator, and as Della said, I'll be co-moderating tonight. But let's get started with our panelists. Natalie, if you'd like to kick us off, just sharing a little bit about your current position as well as some highlights of your career path.
Absolutely. So my name is Natalie Ives. I work at Thrive Financial. I have been there about a month. So my detailed job description is a little lacking as I'm learning my role right now. I'm currently an initiatives consultant in the financial advisor productivity and practice management area under the Center of Excellence called Practice Growth. And so our department is focused on helping financial advisors grow their business. And so I specifically help advisors with specific initiatives to help them grow their business. And so getting to learn the position. So I'm sure the next time I'm here, I'll have a much better introduction to my role. I came from RBC Wealth Management, where I spent the first 9 years of my career. I worked in a variety of areas, starting as an intern. And so I was 21 when I started, and eventually worked my way through a variety of positions, initially doing event planning, and then finally managing our new advisor program. So that's a little about me.
My name is Nelson Snyder. I am a real estate guy, meaning that I am involved in everything real estate, basically. I own 2 different companies. I own a company called Nokomis Property Management, which we buy, own, and run apartments as well as commercial real estate. I also own a company with 2 other partners called Kenwood Commercial, where we do full-service commercial real estate for companies, helping them relocate their office space or industrial space in the Twin Cities. My career path started back in 1999. I was thinking about going to law school and realized that I sucked at school. And so I thought 3 more years of sitting in a classroom might be the death of me. And so I got involved in commercial real estate pretty much right away. I'm sorry to say I'm an Ole, so, but the power of networking is huge, you guys, because I got my job because I interviewed an Ole that was from class of 82 about real estate, wrote a newspaper article about him, stayed in touch with him, and literally he helped me get my first job. So just remember networking, networking, networking. I've spent the last 24 years doing real estate around the Twin Cities, heavily involved within the nonprofit community, because once someone figures out that you know a lot of CEOs or decision makers in companies, they all want you to talk to them to get them to donate money, which means that being on like the Guthrie board, I was a conduit to raise money. Being on the Downtown Improvement District, I was a conduit to raise money. Being on the board of Special Olympics, I've been a conduit to raise money, which makes the world go round. So it's been a really fun experience, but really rewarding in helping organizations grow and develop.
Thank you. My name is Tawia Brown Oaks. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Health Partners. I just like to point out with Health Partners, a lot of times they see that name, but actually Health Partners is an entity made up of 19 different employers. So Park Nicollet, Regents Hospital, Methodist Hospital, Amory, Wisconsin. We have a number of both in-town, local, as well as rural. I've been in my role for about 2 years. It's been a very exciting 2 years to be in healthcare, working through COVID. And then also with the murder of George Floyd in our community, it's really turned a lot of the work that I had been planning on doing upside down on its head. I'm transitioned into Health Partners from Cargill, and I've been with Cargill for 9 years in various human resources positions, including benefits as a business partner. I supported recruitment, international. So I've had just a very long career in human resources. Outside of Health Partners, I'm the chair for Dress for Success Twin Cities, which is a nonprofit here. I started as a facilitator, teaching life skills, life coaching, resume writing, interviewing, conflict management. And then I transitioned to being a board member, and then I've transitioned to now chairing that board. I agree with Nels in networking. All of my interactions, I have 2 children that are college age, and I know you're all surprised by that. Stop. I know. So I'll just go with that. But as I tell my children, don't burn bridges, that you never know. And it's not always the person who you burn that bridge with, but it's who they know. So networking is key. You never know who knows you or who is talking about you. But thank you for allowing me to be here.
I promise I really was surprised. My name is Tiffany Beitler. I am Vice President of Marketing Services at NFR Communications, and I've been there for about 30 days. So with you there. In 2014, I started my own marketing agency called Cooks Bay Marketing, and it was just acquired on March 1st. So I am going to work for NFR, the company that just acquired my marketing agency, and I am tasked with building up a marketing agency within that company. I grew up here. I went to the Carlson School at the U for undergrad, and then I got my MBA at St. Thomas. And honestly, I loved my MBA experience here. It was awesome. Worked in several different industries and corporate marketing jobs, and then decided to take the leap and go out on my own. And I've been volunteering my whole life, but I really got involved in working with nonprofits when I started my own business. And I have several nonprofit clients. So I think we'll probably talk more about that later. But thanks.
How's it going, y'all? Luis, I hold a few different roles right now. I work at Best Buy, which you can probably see on my name tag here. What I do there is I do design and strategy for social impact initiatives that we roll in the community across the entire country. One of the things I'm focusing on right now is improving the way that our employees engage in communities through volunteerism, through donations, through just general support and community building. That's one of the things that we're working through. We have 150,000 employees, and we know that there's passions and interests that they want to pursue, but more importantly, they want to be able to invest their time. They want to invest their resources and energy into these organizations. So part of what I do at Best Buy, I also sat on our employee resource group for Latinx employees. So I got to support with kind of redesigning what that team did, what it looked like, and just reinvigorating that community. And then I also moonlight as a business owner. I'm one of the co-founders, and my brothers would argue me, CEO of Bro Bros Closet. We're opening a second location right now, so we're in the process of doing that kind of work. And it's been a lot of fun. I bring that up because since we started the business, a big thing, whether we made $500 or however it may be, we always gave back to community. My brothers and I were raised by a community. We were the benefits of social programs and things of that sort. So it's always been important for us to give back, doing fundraisers, food drives, toy drives, whatever it may be, but making sure that we show up for the people that provided so much for us. So one of the biggest rules that I abide by is you have to pay it forward. The only way that we can grow together is by supporting each other and feeding into each other at the same time.
Alrighty, thank you all panelists for sharing about your career path, but we know that's not all that you do. So how have you been involved in giving back to the community in the work of nonprofits? And please touch a little bit on how this began, where it began, what that looked like. And we'll start on the opposite end with Luis.
back to me already. Can you repeat the question again? I'm just so used to being the last person.
Yeah, absolutely, changing it up on you a bit. Just talk a little bit about how you've been involved in giving back to the community and your nonprofit work.
Great question. Okay. I don't have a good answer for this one just because it's always been kind of ingrained into my DNA. It's always been a part of my upbringing. It's been a part of my professional career. Before I joined Best Buy, I worked in government and I did youth workforce development for about 6 years. And before that, I worked in rec centers. I don't have a fancy background. I've just kind of grinded to get to where I am today. And my passion now has always driven that. It's always been about how can I do more for the people around me, the pay it forward. I've had so many people invest time and energy into me, provide opportunities, take a risk. So my thing has always been I need to give that back. I need to recreate what I was given to the communities where I exist, to the communities I'm surrounded by, the communities that I impact. So that's always been what drives me. And through that, I've also had the opportunity to sit on a couple of boards, whether it was sitting on Youth Prizes board, which I recently have stepped down from both the boards I sat on just because of taking care of myself. It got to the point where you want to do so much, but you hit a point where you realize, like, I'm doing a lot for others without taking care of myself. And that's the moment that I had. But I will say the board service that I took on was so powerful. It was empowering to be able to see the impact that we can have. So both of the boards that I sat on were working boards. Does anyone know what a working board is? Just raise your hand. Okay, I see one of these standing. Okay. A working board basically means you're going to show up and be a part of this board. You're going to roll up your sleeves and you're going to do some work with the staff. You're going to be working on creating strategy. You're going to be supporting in a lot of different capacities, but you're showing up and you're investing a lot of your time to the success of that organization. So that for me was really, really helpful to get hands-on experience. I was early in my career. They trusted me to do the CEO transition. I mean, they were transitioning CEOs at that moment, and I had never done that before. I did their performance review, things of that sort. Obviously, I got coaching, but it provided me a lot of opportunities I don't think I would have gotten in my day-to-day job. I don't think they would have said, Luis, go do the performance review of Corey Berry. I don't think that would have ever have happened. But for me, that was a professional development experience. And I think as you go into these experiences and you try and understand, one, what's driving my passions, where I want to invest my time and energy, because that's what you're doing. Keep that in mind. But also, two, how can I learn and benefit from this at the same time? Because it is a give and take relationship. It's transactional by nature, and it has to be beneficially mutual or beneficially rewarding. So keep those sorts of things in mind. And that's something that I've always kept in mind as I've gone in and volunteered my time, been able to donate or whatever it may be. I need to know that I'm providing a benefit, but also there's going to be a benefit for me in that.
Yeah, so like you, I grew up doing things for the community. I literally remember when I was 3 years old cutting out little angels that we would put on the tree at church, and my mom ran the toy drive. So I remember being there every year, picking out the toys for the kids, seeing the families come in that needed help. And so it was probably nice for me to see that. We grew up, middle class, but I always had toys under the tree. So it was good for me to see the other side. And then I remember literally driving around with my grandparents doing Meals on Wheels, and my mom would drive around picking up day-old bread from grocery stores and bringing it to the food shelf, and I was always just kind of along for the ride. And so I think as I got older, I wanted to start doing something on my own, and after I got my MBA, I thought, geez, what am I going to do with all my free time? And so I got on the board of a Humane Society, and I did not really know what a working board was when I joined that, and that was a little bit of a rude awakening because I thought I was going to show up once a month and give them ideas and strategy, and that was not the case. So just be aware of that. It was, you are on a committee, you are doing lots of things, and they oftentimes look to you to have requirements to donate a certain amount of money every year. So that's something to know as well. But I really enjoyed it. We made a lot of great impact in the community. And from that, I went on to another board that was more like a local food shelf, or toys, clothes, all those sorts of things for people in need. And it I was able to actually get those two nonprofits to work together, because if people lost their jobs and couldn't take care of their pets, then the Humane Society would come and help them with their pets and the food and all those types of things. So that was neat. So then, as I kept growing my marketing agency, I would started picking up nonprofits as clients, and so I've worked with many. One of them, the latest project we've done, is it's Engage Winona in Minnesota, and it's a brand new website that I just launched. And it's really fun for me to help these organizations. Not all the projects are free. I think that's part of the reason we're here today is you don't, I'm a for-profit business, but it doesn't mean you have to charge the full rate for these nonprofits. So I've had a lot of great projects that I've worked on, and lots of things have come from that.
So I didn't grow up in a giving back family or environment, and I actually didn't join a board or begin to give back until later on in my career. Most of my career, I was a working mother, both working and going to school. Worked during the day and went to school at night. When I started my undergrad degree, I was pregnant with my second son and did not know. And I'd say if I had known that I was pregnant, I probably wouldn't have started, just because that's a lot of work. So it took me 10 years from start to finish to end up with the MBA with children and so forth and working. And so most of that time, I was just kind of in that grind, like literally just, making bread and doing stuff at night. And so once I graduated from school, that's when I realized how much free time I had. I didn't really appreciate how much time that I was dedicated to going to school. So when I graduated, it kind of started small. I became that awesome mom who was the team manager for the baseball team and super organized. And I'd show up with my binders and everybody's birth certificate, and you couldn't tell me nothing because I had the rules here. And then when my kids actually asked me to stop doing that, that opened, because, it's really cool if it's not your mom. And so once they asked me to stop doing that, that's when I started looking around for another opportunity. And at the time I was with Cargill, and we'd have different groups come in, and they'd want people to talk about their experience, a non-traditional experience. And so I would tell them about my life and how I ended up in the role that I had. And then Dress for Success came open. And Dress for Success provides, one of the ways that they provide services is suiting or clothing to women who are looking for gainful employment. And so I love me some fashion. And so I thought, oh, this will be great, because I can help people find some really cute clothes to wear, as well as I could utilize my HR background. And then as through that experience, it actually became much more meaningful to me to be impactful, not in the suiting, which is very important, but also be teaching and educating on life skills that some of us have and some of us need to brush up on and some of us don't know. And so I was able to really utilize my background from an HR perspective to say, okay, this is something that I really enjoy and really want to get into. And from there, I said, I really want to be part of the board. I want to be more impactful, more decisions, more involved than just showing up for a couple hours here and volunteering. And so Dress for Success Board is a working board. So we do, roll up our sleeves and get into it and do a ton of fundraising. And I think for me, that's been probably one of the most rewarding experiences that I've had in my career. Now in my day job with Health Partners, we are a nonprofit. And so I do see all of the different disparities that we have in our community, and not even just in our community, even within our own employees. And forgive me, I will call them colleagues. That's how we refer to our employees at Health Partners, as our colleagues. And so I see that both the community that we serve is also the community that I work with every day. And so that's really allowed me to see the fruits of my labor and find other ways to continue to give back and ways to really impact, and for me, very personally, BIPOC people and especially BIPOC women. And so really leaning in harder into those areas where I feel that I have opportunities to serve, skills to give. And I believe both of the panelists here have said how this is a two-way relationship. So initially when I came in, it was, oh, I have all of this expertise and knowledge that I want to share, but I've learned just as much, if not more, from the clients that we've served, from the communities that I've had the opportunity to work with over the last several years. So I didn't come from an area where it was common to give back. Other than occasionally, like with the Girl Scouts, go buy some cookies, here's some $5 over here. But now that I do, it has felt very both enriching for me in my career. I've made a lot of just different business connections and networking, but also for me personally, to feel that I am uplifting a population that many times is overlooked and marginalized.
So, sorry about that. So I came from definitely a workaholic family, and my parents instilled in us this idea of to whom much is given, much is expected. So growing up as a kid, while we worked continually and all the time, and my parents were pretty much working all the time, it was also very much a push into how can you help, be it at church, school, sports, whatever it was, you still had to make time, no matter how hard you were working, to give back. So my journey started with, definitely being a part of that process, especially giving back on a church basis level, teaching Sunday school, being at the events, seeing my parents host or be the chaperones for those kind of things. As I grew, I actually started my career prior to getting commercial real estate for Congressman Jim Ramstad, who really instilled the idea of giving back to the community. Every year there was a paint-a-thon. Every year there was something that he was doing to try and create a better Minnesota. And he really pushed hard into substance abuse type issues, but always giving back and always doing more than what's being asked. As I grew into my career, I would like to tell you all that I'm super altruistic and I did it all out of the love for people and that kind of situation, but that would be a total lie. Part of building a business is creating networks and giving back and helping. And honestly, I got involved in my first nonprofit work because I was trying to build my business. I was trying to get my name out there. I was trying to meet people. And that was part of the way you met people. You got involved in the chamber. You got involved in the Rotary. You got involved in these different organizations to meet people, yet at the same time, you're giving back. And that giving back was really, really meaningful because you start seeing the work that you're doing, you start seeing the impacts that you're making, and it really means something to you. One of the things, and I kind of said this when we started, when people realize that you know people, they start looking at you and saying, how can you maybe help us? And so as I was looking at different boards, and a lot of times people use boards as what I would call a resume booster, because it's an opportunity to add something more to your resume than I've worked here, I've worked here, I've worked here. I've worked here, but I've also done this. I've worked here, I've done this. So when I was looking at those kind of boards, I was looking for a resume booster. I will 100% say it to you. And, one of the boards I got involved with was the Guthrie. And the Guthrie wanted me because I knew a lot of CEOs, I knew a lot of decision makers, and I started hosting fundraisers at the Guthrie to raise money for the Guthrie. And, it was a different experience because it wasn't necessarily an experience of seeing an impact on someone's life. It was definitely seeing an impact on the arts community and what that represented, but it was just different. And very much a working type board. Like, I was expected, I think my goal every year was over $150,000 of cash brought in the door. So it was very much you have to bring in money, please. After that, I was also very much involved with the downtown council, which I will tell you, if you want anything to do with a non-working board, the downtown council is a great example of what's a non-working board. You literally go to lunch once a month, you sit in a big room, you network, you make no decisions other than to accept or reject the minutes of the previous meeting, and then you move on, because all the work was done in the executive committee level or on a committee basis. And on that front, I spent pretty much a lot of time working on the downtown improvement district budget. Again, because of being in commercial real estate, I knew every building owner and I knew most every single tenant in every building in downtown. So again, they want you to have that impact to be able to pull stakeholders into those meetings. The most meaningful impact that I've seen in my board experience has actually been on the board for Special Olympics of Minnesota. I had the wonderful opportunity to help Special Olympics on their office space relocation. And as part of that, I really got to know the CEO and CFO as well as the chief operating officer. And as we wrapped up their relocation in their office space, the CEO pulled me aside and said, I got two questions for you. Number one, I need you to do the polar plunge, and I need you to raise $10,000. Number two, would you join the board? And I said to the first one, do I really have to jump in the lake? And he said, yes, you do. So I did my job. I raised my $10,000, and I jumped in the Bidet Makaska, and it was horrible. But it was really rewarding. And then following that, literally, I was on the board within 6 months. And that is a working board. Like, our meetings are meaningful. You actually get impact. You get to learn about the mission. You get to see the work you're doing, and it really makes a huge impact. And so 8 years later, and I think 14 plunges later, it's been a really fun experience of being involved in an organization that wasn't so much, what has been more truly altruistic in nature than just being involved for business sake.
So similar to a lot of the folks up here, giving back has been part of who I am since I was a child. And so as an adult, which you all will experience very soon, the 9 to 5 can get kind of old. And I realized that basically every day kind of looked the same. And I got to a point where I was ready to change that. And so looked into a couple of ways to give back. One, working at a food shelf, which I think having some physical hands-on volunteering is just good for the soul, being able to work directly with the people that you're serving. I think that that's a really important aspect to consider when you're volunteering. And then I also serve on 2 boards. And I would say, really thinking strategically about what you're passionate about, and then figuring out how you can best leverage your skills or gain skills in the work that you do with a nonprofit is really important. So like I had mentioned, I previously did event planning at RBC, and so a lot of corporate events. And so initially, when I started volunteering with Haven Housing, which is a homeless shelter for women and children in North Minneapolis, I initially joined to help with event planning. I had just changed roles and was no longer doing that in my day-to-day, and figured, this is something I know pretty well, and so I can help with their annual event and help plan and execute a great fundraiser. That eventually turned into a board position, so I've been on the board now about 3 years, and so it is a working board. We definitely do help a lot in terms of decision making. We work really closely with the executive director, and a couple of years ago had a transition in executive director. Our previous one, who had been there 25 plus years, retired, and so it was a massive effort to really determine who the next best successor would be. And so lots of efforts put in there. And then with that role, it's the same kind of thing where I realized I wanted a hands-on aspect to that. And so took over the Adopt a Family Christmas program. So every year, people are able to adopt a woman or a woman and her family for Christmas. And so I manage that. And so do lots of hands-on work outside of just the strategy that exists on the board. And then the other nonprofit that I'm part of is called Friends of Roseville Parks. So I grew up in Roseville, Minnesota, which most of you probably know, home to the beautiful Rosedale Mall, which was my favorite spot in high school. And so I played soccer growing up, so I loved spending lots of time in those parks. And so the organization is dedicated to maintaining and growing those parks. And last summer, we created the city's first adaptive park. And so it was made possible through, it was like a $950,000 donation, which just the sheer numbers of it blew my mind. So that's another thing I think that you'll learn is everything costs a lot more than you realize. And so fundraising is very important. And so we were able to make that park possible, which was really exciting. And there are not only students within Roseville, but people in surrounding cities that are able to use that park after not really being able to access parks in a lot of metro areas due to various accessibility constraints. So that's my background.
Great, thank you. I love how you talked about aligning your passions with your volunteer experience. That's something that we usually tell our students to do as they're choosing a nonprofit to work with. So the next question we had for you, a lot of you kind of touched on this, but something we tell our students is kind of looking at their volunteer experience and how they can grow from it, develop different skills, whether that be personal skills or business skills, and actually showcasing that on their resume or on their LinkedIn profiles. So in your experience, how has your business expertise been strengthened through your volunteer experience?
So I can say, there's a couple things. Actually, can I say something that you didn't ask? I think that it's a privilege to be able to be in a position to volunteer your time, your resources. And we don't all have that same privilege, and we don't all have that same privilege at the same time. And so when I think about like my background, or I think about the times where I wasn't able to, or it just didn't occur to me, I also I recognize now the perspective and the place that I'm in my life, both from a time, a capacity, my professionalism, that and all of the privileges that I have, that when I interact with the clients that we serve, I see this less than me giving back to them, and I see this as this is the person that I am and how I show up in the world. And so as we, talk and we interact, that really recognize that we are in a very privileged state here. And what I mean that state, just Minnesota, which there's many pieces of Minnesota that are privileged, but that being able to give your time is a privilege. Now with that also means too, and I like when Luis touched on it too, is that you can't always do all the things at all the time. And so you also have to take care of yourself. And there's a lot of different demands that will be asked upon us in our 9 to 5, in our recreation, in the lives that we have, in our religious aspects. And so it's okay to being really garnered with your time and putting hard stops and really just being aware of how much you are giving and how much it is taking away from you. And so I just wanted to just call that out there, that as much as we're all up here, and I do this and I do that, and I'm going to do this tomorrow, and I'm going to raise all this money, this is a privilege. It is a privilege that we have the ability to do that. And it is a privilege that it's not always available to all of us all of the time as well.
So I want to throw something in on your comment.
Bring it.
So does everyone know the song Cats in the Cradle, Silver Spoon, Little Boy Blue, Man on the Moon? When are you coming home, Dad? I don't know when. We'll get together then.
They don't know
Really?
that song.
You don't know that song?
I
oh my
know
gosh,
that
we're gonna play that
song,
for you later.
But that song's like from 1974 or something.
Oh yes, I am showing my age. So I do have to admit, every time I hear that song, my heart starts going, oh crap, I'm a bad dad. Because when you're working a lot, you're volunteering a lot, you're doing different things in the community, your idea of taking care of yourself and your family, 100%. Because you can get burnout on some of this stuff too. Like, I'm sorry, this is totally off topic of the question. But when you're coaching, when you're being involved, when you're doing all these different things, you can give a lot of yourself and realize that you're maybe leaving others behind. So your comments are very apropos. We should probably answer the actual question.
Yeah, I was going to say, can we re-ask the question?
So some of the things I've learned from being on boards and just volunteering, being on different groups is, one is people skills. Being in marketing, business-minded, there's a lot of people that are on nonprofit boards and volunteers that know nothing about business, and they are passionate about what you're actually doing in that organization, and they know a lot about that. So you have to learn how to work with people that kind of speak different languages, if you will. Second, I learned a lot of different aspects of organizations, which actually businesses too. So again, I'm a marketing person, but I learned a lot about budgeting, fundraising, event planning, all these different things that I wasn't dealing with in my day-to-day job. And then also, the last thing is that, jumping off what these two said, is sometimes you don't have the time to commit to these organizations. And I was asked to be on a board, and I think it was one of the first times I've ever done this, because I've always been a yes person, is I said, I just don't have the time. I was trying to build my business. I was already doing some nonprofit projects, and I just said, you deserve someone on your board that's there all the time, that's ready to go, that's ready to give 100%, and I am not that person right now, as much as I wish I could be. So I think it's, keeping in touch with yourself and knowing how much you can give at that certain time. And I also just want to say one last thing. Just because a lot of us said that we grew up giving back or volunteering, that has no effect. I think you don't have to have grown up volunteering and giving back. That is not a requirement to be involved.
Natalie, did you want to add in?
I'm happy to. So what I found is, especially, serving on the board or, taking some type of volunteering role that is close to the organization. So not necessarily being the person, packing the boxes or delivering something or just fundraising, but being a little bit closer to sort of the operations behind it. There are so many opportunities to get involved. And so you really don't necessarily need to be an expert in a particular area. So as I mentioned, I initially started my volunteer work with Haven Housing on the fundraising committee. And so it's a subcommittee, you don't need to be a board member to be a part of it. Anybody, so this is my little pitch. Anybody can be a part of it. There are tons of committees at Haven Housing. We're always looking for people with big ideas or people who are, willing to contribute and, come to the table and brainstorm and be a strategic mind. But there are so many people to learn from, and there's so much to learn. And so it's really just starting and figuring out, initially what your specific passion is. So for me, I think every person deserves a safe place to live. And so homelessness is something that's really a project that I'm passionate about. And so getting started, and then, once you get in a particular organization, there are so many avenues and so many areas that you can dive deeper into. We have like an HR committee. We previously had a COVID-19 strategy planning committee. We have, like a board committee. We've got, just a big variety. And so there's just so much opportunity to learn. So it's just, being open and willing and willing to jump in to any of those types of committees.
Great. Well, at this point in the panel, I actually want to open it up to the students and transition a little bit. So if any students have any questions for our panelists, just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone up to you.
As we're waiting for that first question, I'm going to throw something out. One thing I'd recommend you guys is play to your strengths, because if you like having a microphone, like I can honestly tell you, I love having a microphone, then you should be up front and you should be looking and trying to, raise money. If you hate the idea of being in front of a whole group like we are, then this isn't the volunteer aspect you should think about doing. There are so many things that are needed on between boards, nonprofits, giving back. Literally sometimes it's just carrying all the water for the event. There's so many different ways that you can give back, but assess your own personal traits and know where you like to be. If you love computers and you want to help, a nonprofit with their computers and their database and all those things, they need the help. Most, in my experience, there's not a lot of the business side of being in nonprofits is not always as strong as you would like it to be. So there's always help that needs to be given, and there's expertise that are wanting to be done. Smaller organizations in particular need a lot more of those experiences and expertise than, say, the United Way. The United Way they're huge. They've got, 50 board members, and they've got everything they could ever possibly want. They're doing great work, though. They're doing great work. It's just, where do you want to be and how do you want to interact? Because I'll use Special Olympics as something that's near and dear to me. You can be right up front helping to raise money, helping athletes getting involved, or you can be, I don't really want to be on the front line. I just want to hand out t-shirts, or I just want to make the plunge and I want to be anonymous. There's so many ways that you can get involved that don't feel like you have to be the front line. You can be the middle line. You can also be the back line.
So I want to say something completely opposite of what you just said.
Perfect. Okay.
Sometimes, so for me, when I joined Dress, right, so especially taking over the chair, right, totally freaked out. I did not know what I was doing, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And so sometimes some of the best ways to develop and grow is to go into face your fear and to do something different that you've never had the opportunity to do. So like I said, my background is in human resources. My MBA gives me a lot of different plethoras of all these different experiences, but there's other things in there that I'm totally freaked out. I do not like talking to and raising money. That makes me so uncomfortable, right? Talk about pitting out. That's me when I have to talk to them. But that's a way that I face my fear, and that's a way that I try and grow myself and develop myself, is I do things that make me uncomfortable. And believe me, it's uncomfortable, but I also recognize it's something that I need to do. So beyond just really leaning into the expertise that you have. Sometimes you can overwork a muscle that you have because it's your go-to and you know how to do that. And I'm not saying that handing out water is bad and, more power to you and do that and do the polar plunge. I will never, ever do that. I will write you a check in a heartbeat. But I also lean into some of the things that make me extremely uncomfortable, because a lot of the times on the board, this is an opportunity for me to develop a new skill, to sharpen a new skill that I can take back to my full-time job, that I might not have that exposure to, or that ability for what I'm getting paid to. So the board also allows me, or the volunteering also allows me to do things that I don't always have the opportunity to do. So I also say, sometimes just, put on that imposter syndrome, kick it to the side, but just face that fear. Do things that make you uncomfortable. Be in places that sometimes make you uncomfortable. That's not necessarily your typical lived perspective, to gain a more rich overall experience.
I'm going to add to that really quick. Also, the benefit of stepping outside of your comfort zone in a nonprofit world is likely you're surrounded by people with different backgrounds from you. I've now worked in financial services my entire career, and so the people I work with are typically more similar to me because we've got a similar interest and expertise in this particular, niche area of business, whereas the people I serve on a board with have, a vastly different experience in work. I mean, I work with lawyers and people who work in nonprofits. And so you're able to gain expertise from others that you wouldn't necessarily be exposed to in your day to day.
Okay, now y'all have had lots of time to think of questions. Who's got a
I'd
question?
love to hear from you guys. As you can tell, we like to talk, but I want to know from you guys what you have questions about, because I want to be helpful to you.
You know, Luis is modest, but I first met him when he was sitting in your place at a Business 200 panel, and now he's on the panel. So he graduated from St. Thomas not too long ago.
Yeah, literally sitting in your seat. So I know some of you probably just want to go back home, take a nap. You got homework you're trying to avoid. There's probably 1,000 other places you'd rather be. So I personally want to make sure that this is valuable for you. And if you have questions, you get these out there.
Okay. Oh, we got one.
Thank you.
I will bring you the mic. I will bring you the mic quickly.
So I don't know how related this is to the topic, but I was just kind of curious, could any of you maybe speak to if somebody wanted to just start their own nonprofit, what would be the first steps that they would take to make that happen, like in terms of like actually in terms of like the legal stuff and everything, like how would you start going about that?
I don't have any official advice, but I know people who've started their own nonprofits, and I've been a part of a board that was going through the formal 501c3 filing. It's a process, but know that you can still make impact without officially being a 501c3. If you have a passion, you want to give back to your community, you want to be able to create that structure, you can. I would say I'd love to learn more about what you have in your mind, if there's something else that you kind of piqued the question, but there is formal processes that you want to go through. There's due diligence that needs to be done because of tax implications and of a lot of other number of things that impact nonprofits. But if we're talking about, I want to do something in my community and I want to be able to create that program, I want to create that structure, start small. Start just showing up in the space that you want to show up in. You could start off by you being that volunteer with another organization. You may create your own thing later on down the road, but know as you go into it, and the saying of no good work goes unpunished is true, especially when you start serving your community. When they see that you're doing something valuable, that you're meeting a need that wasn't being met before, people will talk, and the people will show up. So be prepared for that as well. Right? So if you start to do really good work in your community, you start doing good work in the communities that you're serving, more people will come because they are going to want that level of support from you as well. Not a good answer, I know, but I'm excited for you.
I'll give you a little bit too. It's just like starting a business in all aspects. You really do need to incorporate and do the legal paperwork. You need to look at insurance. You need to look at, staffing. You need to look at your idea. You need to look at the marketplace. If you're, whatever you're planning on doing, if it's going to be an animal shelter, there's a lot of animal shelters already out there. So maybe think about like what your goal or your drive or your mission's going to be. But definitely there is going to be a legal aspect because unfortunately we live in a very litigious society. And you need to make sure you're covering yourself because you don't want to go out there and hopefully be doing good work, A, potentially take money, and B, potentially get sued, and then have bigger issues. So definitely do the legal framework first, like any business. Even though it's, I know a lot of, it always used to be not-for-profit, I think, or non-profit. The wording has changed, and all nonprofits are businesses in essence. They might be doing a totally different, goal, but they're all selling a product. So remember that, your product, be it housing, be it healthcare, be it helping, kids with special needs, it's all a business and it's a product. And so it's about giving back, but definitely if you're starting something, do the legal work. You know, I think everyone knows Johnny Pops. I would not have recommended to Johnny Pops to start selling popsicles without first getting some liability insurance, because someone likely would get sick somewhere and then they would be done. So just know you got to take all those things into consideration.
I just want to piggyback off that. It is like starting a business, and having done that, honestly, this is probably the opposite of what a professor would tell you, but I'd say just dive in and start. Start the legal work, start doing everything that you can. Because I think if I would have known all the steps it would take to start a business before, I'm not sure I would have done it, to be honest. So it's almost like, do a little at a time, and then, oh man, yeah, we got to do that. Okay, now we got to do that now. So that's maybe not the best advice, but that's how I got it done. And then the other thing to consider, you guys, is one of the reasons you want to be a 501c3 is because most people will only want to donate to organizations that are a 501c3 because it's a write-off. At the end of the day, it's just how it is. And companies want that as well. They want that stamp of the 501c3 so that they can write the donation off.
Would you like another question? Okay. Who else has a question? Anyone? Oh, there's one in the back here. I'm running.
I was wondering how COVID has changed your approach to fundraising.
So, okay, so for Dress for Success, COVID really, not just fundraising, it actually changed the way in which we do our business. So like most organizations, we went virtual and went remote, and we provided all of our services to our clients virtually. And we recorded a lot of the different trainings that we have. And then last July, our building burned down, just an electrical fire. And so that really enabled us to really change the way in we provide service. Instead of having a brick and mortar, we're transitioning to have a mobile unit. So now that actually expands the services that we'll be able to provide, because we'll be able to reach our clients where they are. So instead of having them, which is a much more equitable approach, so instead of having them come to us in the hours that we serve, now we can be to them. And so for the other piece too with COVID too was a lot of the funding that was available for small businesses. We were able to leverage and take that opportunity, and that's what paid for our mobile unit. So not necessarily just in the fundraising, but we were able to leverage some of the grants and the loans that were available through the government. But having something that's a little bit different that makes us unique, kind of we were talking about how do you differentiate yourself, but having a mobile unit to be able to provide those services to get to the women, it also expands our reach. So that was something I don't think that had COVID not happened, had the fire not happened, we would have seen this as an opportunity for us to do things differently than we had in the past.
I can maybe speak from the funder's perspective, where at Best Buy, I think in the last 2 years since COVID started to take shape, I've read 300 grant proposals roughly. It changed drastically because it went from the nice to do's to the have to do's. We went from being able to do these programs because we thought they were awesome or cool, or these organizations thought they would be a great opportunity, to we need to keep our lights on. We need to keep our staff on board, make sure that they stay employed. There's people at these organizations that are doing critical work that we need to make sure we continue to support that critical work. So we went from funding specific programs to capacity building, or not capacity building, sustainability. We need to make sure these organizations that we know do good work, but unfortunately, like the business side of a nonprofit isn't as strong as you want it to be, was really evident now. We knew that they were, I would say, like, I don't know what better way to put it, check to check. These organizations needed a lifeline. There's some organizations that were just fine. flush with cash. The reserves are insane. But then there's smaller organizations that are doing deep impact work in their communities that didn't have that luxury. So they were really dependent on these grants. So we shifted our entire granting model to say, what are the most imperative things that we need to support right now? And let's support that. A big focus for us was education. So how do we make sure students can still go to school while not physically going? We're supporting rural communities where we all saw in the news, students are going to a McDonald's to get Wi-Fi. How do we actually address those issues around equity, making sure that every young person in those communities had access to high quality internet and then had the devices to stay online? So that's kind of what shifted on the funding side of things. We're seeing it start to shift back to we can now support some of these programs because we've addressed those foundational issues to keep these organizations around, but also to make sure that they're meeting the most intense needs of their community at the same time.
I would throw out there, it really depended upon the nonprofit and what they were doing. So I'll use Special Olympics as a prime example. Special Olympics is hugely based upon activities and events. When you cannot get anyone together, you cannot get athletes together, you cannot do anything, it really hampered and hurt the organization. I think last year's Polar Plunge was a $2.5 to $3 million Polar Plunge fundraising experience. This year alone, it's been over $4 million. Pre-20 or 2029. I think our last plunge ended in 20, right as COVID was hitting, and was close to 5. So that ability to get together and do events changed everything, and we're building back from that. On the other hand, I have a client, Global Rights for Women, that I'm working with right now. They've seen an uptick in their funding, partially due to just world events. Leaving Afghanistan's had an impact where young women aren't going to school anymore, and people are seeing that and they're trying to give. And Global Rights for Women is one of the leaders in writing a lot of legislation and helping countries deal with those kind of issues and help address them in an equitable way. So depending on the nonprofit, depending on the fundraising or the event type structures that you're in, had all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I hate to cut this fabulous discussion short, but we're running a little close on time. So I would just want to challenge maybe one or two panelists, if you could share with us in maybe like a one-liner, what advice do you have for these future business leaders?
I think this was brought up earlier, but I just think making the most of every relationship that you have. Someone that I interned with, it was in 2012. She actually works at Thrivent, and I hadn't had a conversation with her in like 8, maybe 9 years, and chatted with her recently. And she remembered the fact that I had worked as an intern. And so, especially at the beginning of your career, be really intentional about the relationships that you make and making good impressions, and just being eager and willing and happy to learn.
Amazing, thank you. Did you want to? Yeah. Go.
I was just going to say, as we all go forth into business, recognizing the voices that are not being heard. Many times we're very much trying to get ourselves out there, but there's many voices that don't get represented, that don't get supported, and don't get heard. So as you're moving into the boardroom, and I hope to see you all in those C-suites, and please go to Health Partners, recognizing and addressing and amplifying and supporting and being accomplice to the voices that are not being heard in the room.
I love that. Can I add on to that? I absolutely love that. Understand the power that you have through your voice, but also the decisions that you make. And one of the greatest things that was told to me was to stay grounded. Stay grounded in my truth and stay grounded in reality. Because as you continue to move up in your career, you lose sight of the things that are actually happening in the world sometimes. You build all these luxuries around you, actually block you off from that. So how do you stay grounded? How do you keep in touch with reality and what's going on in the world around you? Because it can get really easy to lose touch. And you can tell when some people lose touch because you look at them like, oh, you've lost it. But keep yourself grounded. Know that there are people that are looking for you to amplify your voice on their behalf, whether they've asked you to or not. know that that's a responsibility that we carry every single day with the decisions that we make. So I would just leave you with that, and I love that what you brought up. Thank you.
I'm gonna add one last thing. When you get involved, treat it like it's something important, and do not sign up for something that you're not gonna do, because it's like a job. And if you decide to be on a board, treat it like a job. So you show up, you do your research, you do the things you're supposed to do, and you show up to the meetings, and you don't just use it as, oh, I got this on my resume, this is great, I'm done, I don't have to do anything. Show up, because they're expecting you to show up.
Amazing. Panelists, thank you all for your advice and insights. Please join me in a round of applause to thank you. And with that, we will bring our Business for the Common Good panel to a close. So thank you again, students, for coming. Thank you again to panelists. If any students have any further questions or would like to connect with panelists on LinkedIn, they will be available afterwards. Have a great evening.